Hello and welcome to another Tech Capital interview. As the data center industry rapidly evolves, it's essential to address the pressing challenges and envision the future of data center solutions and hybrid IT. To talk through this and much more, today I'm joined by Chris Downie, Chief Executive Officer at hybrid IT infrastructure provider Flexential. And Chris, it's a pleasure seeing you and speaking to you again. You've had quite a busy year so far, even though it's only 4 or 5 months into the year.
I know it's always amazing how fast it moves, but always a pleasure to chat with you. So look forward to the conversation.
I'm sure. Well, I think maybe we can start with a bit more of a general window into what the challenges are right now in our space. So, I mean, what do you see when you go out there and talk to clients, to partners, to other industry competitors even? What do you see as everyone's challenge right now in 2024?
Yeah, so I think everyone knows that demand for the raw material of the data center is really at unprecedented levels, given really the onset of AI and GPU infrastructure requirements on top of what was really traditional, CPU environment demand that we've enjoyed for several decades. But really, there are multiple increments of demand, which I think is created a need for everyone to access our raw materials, which is really land, power, and network, much further out than we ever had planned on before. And so that's making everyone begin to think differently about perhaps the traditional destinations for large-scale data center demand, which obviously, like in Northern Virginia, is an example of that. And there's a migration of consumption to where those raw materials are prevalent, and we refer to those as the edge markets that we're in. We've been characterized as being in kind of secondary markets for some time, but all of our markets are major population centers where our consumers want to remain proximate to those population centers, but ultimately the traditional destinations have become constrained in land and power in particular. So I think that's a challenge for us. We're kind of where the puck is going at this juncture, but that doesn't mean that we won't have our own challenges with some of those raw materials as well.
Yeah, and I guess as we add the AI layer into the whole thing, this all becomes even harder to plan, predict, and deliver on a large scale. And what you say, it's a mirror of what's happening in Europe as well. The emergence of tier 2, tier 3 markets, or secondary tertiary markets, as some people prefer to call it. So which is quite interesting. And you're operating in 19 markets across the US. It's not a small footprint. So it's quite an interesting footprint. Before we get into the AI conversation and how that's going to change the game on all this, how do you sort of envision the future of data center solutions versus hybrid IT? Paint us a general picture of where this is all headed and how this Flexential positions itself within that. And then we can go into the AI world.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's becoming more distributed at an increasing rate than it ever has before. I think kind of compute of yesteryear, really when the onset of the public cloud, it was about establishing the core and then really distributing to the edge, if you will, over time. And I think right now, given some of the raw material constraints that we just discussed a minute ago, the core is being redefined, and ultimately there'll be a broader distribution of the data center resource, if you will. So we think our geographic distribution will become increasingly relevant to what will become an increasingly distributed compute dynamic. And the other thing is that network has continued to become increasingly critical. We manage our own network fabric across the country, and we're very focused on making it as easy to consume that resource as it's been to consume public cloud, as an example. And so we've been focused on innovating ways for our customers to more seamlessly consume network as if it was kind of a public cloud resource, and we've made some great strides in that.
I mean, speaking of the fabric layer, you've been quite busy launching that product as well, the Flexentials fabric, with several dual capabilities. I mean, maybe let's talk through that. What does that deliver to the market? How is that a differentiator? What's the USPs?
Yeah, so the Flexential fabric capability was really rests on top of that, nationwide network fabric that I discussed that ties all of our facilities together, ties into 11 carrier hotels. We host several subsea cables, and so there's a fairly broad scale of resource, but also, as I mentioned before, just the kind of the ability to federate anywhere and everywhere is critically important. But really, what the Flexential fabric is, it's a next generation solution designed to deliver software-defined interconnection services to our customers. But what's particularly unique about it is that we can make all of our interconnection and virtualized compute capabilities available to our customers over a single port. And so that really hasn't been done before, and in many ways, kind of one and done for our customers. Back to what I said earlier about making it seamless for our customers to enable the resources that they need. They can do that over a single port, and it's not just IP transport; it's also private line. It's also they can access our DRAS or disaster recovery virtualized compute resources, and really we enable that over our Flexential Experience portal. So it's really a very dynamic web interface that makes it incredibly easy for consume all the capabilities that we have built into our and really from anywhere they are. And so that's really the everywhere and anywhere part of it.
Okay, very interesting. And then let me tie in the AI angle into this as well, because I mean, one of the big pain points I'm getting across from a few people that I speak around, it's on planning and provisioning for future capacity, without really know where this is going with AI. So how does Fabric kind of help with planning, with budget constraints as well? Just another big topic, especially for 2024. There's some uncertainty in the air, and how people deploy their budgets. How does Fabric kind of help with provisioning, with planning, for the future in an AI world future as well?
Yeah, well, really at the stage that AI is advancing today, there's been a lot of discussion about, how much compute environment it needs. But what's going on within the compute environment is actually really incredible. There's more what I call inter-facility networking, to enable the data processing that's going on inside an AI GPU supported environment. It's kind of a level of cabling that no one's ever seen before, and really what that's going to do is it's going to have an impact on how much network there needs to be outside the facility to really federate the data to its ultimate destination. And so we think that as much as there's kind of a bull rush on the data center resource, that will soon turn to network availability, network scale, network flexibility, and that's really what Flexential Fabric's all about. So we've got a fairly significant resource, fairly significant scale, and with the Flexential Fabric orchestration capability, over that single port over web interface, that will allow our AI based companies to access network much easier than they would if they didn't have the Flexential Fabric available to them.
Interesting. I mean, I just find it fascinating where this is all headed, in terms of what AI is going to bring. I mean, we're talking about tripling, quadrupling the size of the industry. So solutions like this would be quite fulcral to make it all work, and make sure we are sustainable as well, because there's sustainable points to all this, in terms of making use of resources. Maybe you can talk us through that a little bit as well. What's the sustainability angle for something like Fabric? I guess just better management of resources being one of them alone helps a lot.
Yeah, I think it's better management of resources, greater enablement of the compute environment. So there's no need for unnecessary sprawl, if you will, of infrastructure. It can be, as dense and concentrated as it's designed to be, because, ultimately the fabric, can enable it across a pretty broad geographic topology and in scale. So, I think it's about sustainability is about more efficient use of all the resources that we enable in our environment, and that's been important for us for quite some time.
Okay, and then I guess this kind of easily leads us to one of my favorite topics, which is geography and points on the map. So, I mean, talking about your existing portfolio, you've already mentioned you've got 19 markets. I think it's quite a few dozens of data centers. I think it's 45 data centers, something like that. You got around 3 million square feet of space as well. I mean, you're present in places like Denver, Minneapolis, Dallas, Philadelphia, Richmond, Jacksonville, Tampa in Florida. So there's a lot of points on the map. So maybe we can split this into two. So what's the plans for the existing portfolio in terms of expansion? And how does AI kind of reshape things? Are you retrofitting? Are you doing things differently on the back of it over the last 12, 18, 24 months? And then the second part, we can focus on what's next, what's the new markets to go. So maybe starting with the existing portfolio, what's happening in terms of expansion?
So I think all the metrics were pretty spot on that you said in terms of the number, but I think what's implied in the number is reach and scale. So we believe we're in more markets in the U.S. than most, in particular, at our level of scale. So when you mention markets like a Charlotte and a Raleigh and a Tampa, we've been in many of these markets for 15 to 20 years at this juncture, and are really the market leader in that respective market. So we enjoy market share and brand. Now, we, like everybody else, has to prioritize our capital to where we see the greatest demand for really scale and our capabilities. And so we've been focused, and I'd say in the last 5 years in particular, on really strategically targeting our presence in key technology hubs and emerging markets across the country. And so, our focal markets for the last several years have been Portland, Oregon, and Hillsboro. We entered that market, we believe really pioneered that market 20 years ago, and now we're working on our fifth facility in that market and delivering over 50 megawatts in that market over the next couple of years. Portland is maybe not the largest market, but it's been the fastest growing market in the country for the last couple of years. So we'll continually remain focused on meeting the demands in that market in particular. I'd say next up is really Atlanta. Atlanta has been kind of number 5 and number 6 on the data center destination market, really the whole time that I've been in the industry, which is over 15 years at this juncture. But given the raw material constraints in Northern Virginia, we are actively seeing larger scale demand push into Atlanta, and we are working on our 6th facility in that marketplace as well. 2 buildings under development to deliver another 50 megawatts. And so given that it was number 5 or 6 for quite some time, it'll advance in the data center destination landscape. We've been in Denver for 20 years, really a home market for us in many ways. And so but Denver, while there's always been data center demand there, I don't think it's necessarily been a destination in the past. That's changed. It's been a technology hub and really sitting on the crossroads of network traversing the country. And so we've seen tremendous amount of demand there, and we've got near-term plans for additional expansion. And then I'd say there's sort of smaller areas that we've invested in, Tampa, Las Vegas, Nashville, and we're in Dallas. That's obviously a kind of a tier 1 destination, but we'll continue to invest in Dallas. So it's really, many markets, but I'd say we see opportunity in every other market that I haven't mentioned that we're in. So I think I mentioned, maybe 7 of them, but we're in 19 markets, and they're all, NFL cities and major, population centers. And so, we see opportunity for expansion there as well.
Yeah, and some of them are quite clear as well, what sort of angle of the service would be aimed at, such as financial services guide. All those things quite interesting. And I mean, Atlanta is also a very good use case because it's coming up a lot in conversations, not just in North America, but even outside of North America. People are really looking at Atlanta at the moment. And I guess it's a very central point on the US map. So I'm sure it's a very
Yeah.
good location.
Yeah, there's one other thing that I think is important to the kind of the consumer conversation is that there's been such a large scale pivot of, I'd say, folks that traditionally served enterprise. They've pivoted their focus to solving for large scale hyperscale requirements. And so you can look at a QTS and a Cyrus One and a Switch, and that's a great model. There's great scale there for them, but that's creating a gap in the marketplace for those of us that really provide a multi-megawatt product to both technology consumers as a service consumers, but to the enterprise broadly defined, be it financial services, healthcare. And so there's fewer providers for those folks to look at to solution to multi-megawatt requirements. And so we see it as an opportunity for us because that's our power alley, and that's what we're going to remain focused on. And where they may have had 10 choices in the past, or maybe down to 3. And we're going to remain committed to that product set, and hopefully be able to get more than our fair share of growth in that arena.
I mean, it sounds like a sustainable niche, in my honest opinion, something that has long legs to walk.
Yeah.
If we're looking to, so how do we finance all this? And we'll get back into the markets that are not in yet, but how are we looking in terms of capital? So what are the plans in terms of who's paying for the expansion? This is what I want to ask. Is it organic capital? Are you going to go out to the market to look for more cash to finance all this? How are you going to do the rollout and the expansions from a financial angle, investment angle?
Yeah. So perhaps to state the obvious, everybody knows it's an incredibly capital intensive business. Capital, though, is very much interested in investing in platforms and assets like what we have here at Flexential, because we've got really a demonstrated return dynamic for several decades. And now that demand is at an unprecedented level, pricing has inverted. There's pre-selling given the demand supply dynamic. I think the potential for even more attractive returns is available to investors. And so in our case, we're private equity backed at this juncture, but in 2021, we put a large scale ABS vehicle in place to really kind of serve as a conveyor belt for continued development of assets. So we'll develop an asset contributed to the ABS. That provides a certain loan to value based on the appraised value of the asset, and gives us and generates liquidity for us to develop the next assets. As we evolve into the future, I expect that we will probably diversify our capital base to bring in infrastructure investors alongside our PE investors, and that give us more development capital to really seed more assets in more of the markets that I didn't mention earlier in the conversation. And so that'll be our capital structure focus of the future. But we wouldn't be able to secure that capital if the return profile wasn't there, and it's very much there.
No, it's very, very interesting that you're considering taking a different road, or at least widening the roads. It's not taking a different road, it's widening it up where you've got. And I think because you've got a proof of concept already in place, as you mentioned, 15, 20 years of delivering. So I'm sure the investors will be lining up for something like this with the scale.
Yeah, I think the kind of the dynamic is really the quantum of capital requires a widening of the aperture of where you secure your capital. So if you look at some of the precedents of like how DigitalBridge is financed, DataBank, Advantage, or Stonepeak with Cologix and CoreSite, they've really invited investors to come in to, continue to underwrite, asset development or really platform development. And the platform, is that we've been operating for 2 decades now, is really provides a risk adjusted approach to growth, because we're not greenfielding something that we haven't done 10 times over before. So we really look at our yield potential as pretty attractive, because it's risk adjusted as well.
Very interesting. I mean, some of the names that you mentioned there, they run portfolios with beyond US borders. Is that the dream for Flexential? Take it outside of the US eventually, and not just Canada, maybe Latin America, Europe, Africa, APAC. What's the dream in terms of expanding this over the longer term?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's logical that there'll be a future chapter of Flexential that includes, international expansion of some sort. We've got a lot to focus on here domestically, but we're at a scale that that would be a logical, next step. That's not in any imminent plans for us currently. We do have a lot of international clientele. I mentioned, our hosting of subsea cables in both on the East and West Coast. And so that gives us, global relevance, and as really the access points for, large scale international consumers. And so, we'll continue that. But I don't see us kind of jumping into an international market in the next year or so at this juncture.
Okay, but it will come. We'll be here to see it, where we're going to land first. And then I think, Chris, to kind of bring everything around, if we're now looking to the rest of 2024, we're almost halfway through the year. We already kind of got a picture of how the rest of the year is going to go. If you're looking to the final 6 months and then into 2025, what do you think are going to be the main kind of trends, challenges, opportunities within your space that you will be seeking to address? So it's the next 12 months, really.
Yeah, well, I kind of touched on a few of them, but I think we're expecting continued unprecedented demand. That just means that we have to, develop as much capacity as we possibly can. And, we're actively doing that. So we've got 74 megawatts that we're going to deliver over the next 18 months. But ultimately, if we could move even faster, we could meet more demand. What's supporting that growth is, I mentioned pricing inversion earlier. I've been in the industry for 18 years now, and really 16 and a half of those years was about price compression. And given the demand supply dynamic, that has inverted, where pricing, it's gone up as much as 40 to 50% in the last year. Given the demand supply dynamic, we're pre-selling, our capacity, much earlier than we ever have. Really pre-selling wasn't something that happened in our product setup until about 18 months ago. So that's providing us, more air cover, to continue to focus on development. So those are benefits as well that help support what is the challenge of delivering, more capacity for, both traditional demand and, this new AI GPU, oriented demand. And then really making sure, we discussed it earlier, that, network resources is at a scale and scope to meet what's going to emanate from these AI environments over the next couple of years.
Okay. So, and then last question. So when you look at the world, and it can be data center related, not data center related, but something that has an impact in the industry, at least, what keeps you up at night? What worries you in the current state of everything?
Well, I think, there's lots of discussion about raw materials, so I won't, belabor that. We're all kind of searching for, land and power to support this demand. But, I think the industry's focus on sustainability is increasingly important. And, really the conversation started, I'd say maybe, 4 or 5 years ago, where everybody not only began to have the conversation, but make commitments. And we've done that in our own right. But, for myself, having a 16-year-old daughter that is going to inherit this world and everybody else's kids, that we really need to continue to make commitments on sustainability, because I think we're seeing certainly changes in weather and in landscape that is implying that we've got to do something different. So I'd say that's I try to make sure that we don't kind of set and forget in that front. We're constantly having the conversation, because it's going to be a marathon.
And we've seen some scary examples with Brazil reaching over 50 degrees last summer, so over Christmas. We've seen the desert in Saudi Arabia be turning green over the last few weeks, which is not a normal thing. So there's a lot of examples out there that we need to worry about and make sure this all works in favor of the planet and the future generations. But Chris Downie, Chief Executive Officer of Flexential, thank you so much for talking to me. It's always a pleasure. As per your home, thank you for watching, and do check our website and give us a follow on social media for more breaking and timely news from across the digital infrastructure sector worldwide. At the Tech Capital, you lead, we report. Bye for now.